Hi, this is Latha, and you're listening to the Passive Investor Show.
The views and opinions provided on this show are for informational purposes only and should not be misinterpreted as an offer to buy or sell any securities or to make or consider any investment or course of action. For more information, please go to passiveinvestorshow.com.
And now, the Passive Investor Show. Here's your host, John Fortes.
Welcome, PI listeners, to the Passive Investor Show. I'm the Passive Investor Consultant, John Fortes, your host of the only ranked podcast for passive investors and multifamily syndications. Our goal and purpose of this show is to be a resource to passive investors and help them master their passive investments in real estate funds. My guest today is Latha, and we're going to focus on the active investor responsibilities of a multifamily investment. Shri is the CEO of the Latha Group. Shri is a multifamily investor in the San Francisco Bay Area who has been investing in multifamily since 2014. She brings her experience as a data scientist and researcher to finding, analyzing, and acquisition of commercial multifamily. Shri, welcome to the show.
Thank you, John, for having me.
Shri, tell us about your background and how you got into this.
So I got into it into real estate in 2014 when I bought my first 12-unit apartment in Dallas, in Texas. And it started more from a point of view of a need rather than a want, because my husband actually got sick in 2010, and we were told that maybe there's a chance that he'd be disabled in 5 years, which was a shock to our system. So we had to figure out a way in which we could generate some passive income in the event that he did get worse. But the good part of the story is he did not get worse. He got better in the next year or so, 99% better, and he's been maintaining that ever since. And but the good thing on the flip side, what it did do is it set like a fire under us to make sure that we move on the multifamily much more faster, and we took more chances than we would have otherwise taken that put us on this path to building our multifamily portfolio.
Wow, I'm sorry to hear that that's what prompted you guys to get involved in this. But what I did notice is you guys are in California.
That's right.
How do you guys make that happen in California? You guys invested out of state, right, on the first one?
Correct, yeah. It was out of state on the first one.
All right, awesome. Walk us through how you did that, because a lot of investors, they want to invest closer to home, but you chose not to. What were the reasons behind that?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I bought into the narrative that you can't make money in California, because that's the standard narrative is it's too expensive, there's no cash flow, and you can buy very few units with the money that you do have. So I just bought into that narrative, and I knew I wanted to buy more number of units because I wanted that economies of scale. I knew I was going to do a bunch of renovations. So it just made sense to pick a market that was growing, but still out of state on my first deal, because I didn't have enough to gain those same economies of scale in California. So that's what prompted the first out of state piece. It was difficult. I'll be honest, it was difficult. We did have to make a couple of trips to Dallas before we narrowed it down. Now, I mean, ever since we've figured out ways to optimize travel, but on the first one, we got into contract on deals that fell through. So we would travel there, do the inspections, and the deal will fall through, right? So there were times when we had to go a couple more times that we would have originally anticipated. But on the second deal that we were in contract on, we were able to close. And the key to getting out of state investing, from my point of view, is to find the right property management team, which then has like the in-house contractor team who will do all of your renovations, and they're all incentivized. So the property manager gets a higher bonus for finishing on time. The contractor gets, is also incentivized to finishing on time. The property manager keeps the contractor in check, and the broker keeps the property manager in check. So it's all about setting all those checks and balances so everyone operates on the schedule that they're supposed to within the budget.
I'm sure there was a thorough vetting process of going through that whole process. but
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely. It was to make sure, basically, as if you were boots on the ground yourself, there's how much you have to trust that team that you are hiring and sourcing out. So
Correct.
let's just pivot now, because you said you bought into that narrative. And because what I know from your background, you also invested in California, right? So you
Correct.
invested out of California and you bought into the narrative of you can't do it here.
Right. So after my first deal
Yeah.
and I made some money on that first one, then I brought that money back to California and started investing in California.
How did you do it? How did you
yeah.
do it? let's set the table here, all right?
Yeah,
Let's
so
set the table.
there's three main strategies for sure in California that I use. One is called cash for keys. One is called ADUs, which stands for accessory dwelling units. And then the last one is actually layout changes. Those are my three main strategies, and we can jump into each of these.
All right. So you're moving money back into California, right? I want people
Correct.
to grasp this, because they can do this in their own home state if you're buying into the theory. For
Correct.
instance, I don't invest Massachusetts, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I might because of your strategies now, right?
Sure.
All right. So let's go into why California, and then we'll go into your three series.
Yeah, I mean, why California was pretty much stronger market, and I had the money to invest in California. That was kind of the entry point. But once you cross that threshold, then it becomes, what is the strategy? And the strategy was, California is a rent controlled market. All of California is, as of 2020, rent controlled. So when there are certain markets in California that have been historically rent controlled, so for like 30, 40 more years, and those cities have extremely low rents compared to today's market rents. And the cash for keys strategy, the first one that I talk about, is essentially a mutually agreed upon agreement between you, the owner, and the tenant, that the tenant will take a certain amount of money in return for giving you the keys to the unit vacant. So you're agreeing that the tenant takes money in return for vacating the unit. And now you have a vacant unit that you can then renovate and put on the market at today's market rents. So we're talking 1,000 to 2,500 of a bump up. So like 1,500 a difference in rent, which you never find in a market that is keeping up with today's rents. So that's where both the risk and the return comes from.
Now, you have a background as a data scientist and a researcher. So I'm sure you really thoroughly vetted all of these options and you formulated the business plan, but now you had to implement it. Walk us through how many units, the strategy you used, and how you achieved that strategy.
Right. So the money that I brought back from Dallas bought 14 units. Not much. I bought 12 units in Dallas and I bought 14 in California. I was able to, move the tenants out, renovate each of those units, and they went from $700 to $1,350 in rent per month. So that's about $650 in a bump up in rents. And I bought that property at 2.9 million, and it appraised for 4 million after I was done with those. The second thing that I did do is I do layout changes. So I take a studio and I convert them to 1 bedrooms. I take 1 bedrooms and convert them to 2 bedrooms. Usually simply by taking out like older standalone kitchens. So when you walk into a studio unit, typically some of the older ones have like a detached kitchen. But people no longer want detached kitchens, they want the open floor plan. So what we tend to do is remove the kitchen, what was previously the kitchen, gut the unit, and take some of that square footage from the kitchen, take some from the living room, and create a new bedroom, thereby increasing the rents exponentially, because now your studio is now a 1 bedroom. It's a small 1 bedroom, but it's still, given the density of California and how much rents are going for, you will still get a significant bump up from what you would have got as a studio.
I love that. It's very unique, and you obviously implemented some cash for keys in that process as well. You don't have to dive into the numbers.
Correct.
But
Yeah.
there was a lot of negotiating going on, and what's that process look like? Can you do it, or does someone have to step in?
You can do it, but I don't recommend you do it. There's
Are
lawyers
there reasons
involved.
why? Are there reasons
Yes,
why?
the city is very particular about the steps you need to take to go through cash for keys. And this is essentially to protect tenants from harassment or any kind of pressure to take the cash for keys. So there's a very systematic set of processes that the city has put into place, and you have to be very careful. Otherwise, it is a political risk for you as an owner to do this. So you got to be really, really.
Awesome. So that's how it looks on the outside. If you're investing in your hometown with rent control and different practices like that. I love the way you guys did that and figured it out. Now, there's also some other challenges you have as well, as far as investing, working a full time, as well as raising a family. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, so I started investing in 2014 when I had both my husband and I had full-time jobs. We didn't have kids, thankfully, when we started, so that was time saver for sure. But over the years, our jobs started to get more busier, and our kids were, in the picture. We now have 2 kids, 4 and 2 years old. The amount of work that it takes actually definitely started to pile up, and the scale at which we were operating also started to get bigger. So both of those things made life really difficult, to the point where we considered starting to invest out of state to remove ourselves from the business a little bit. So you can very easily get entangled with your business to the point where it is not as passive as you originally thought. And kids of course, with the pandemic, that exacerbated the problem that we already had, because now you don't have childcare and your kids are home all day. So that made us really reevaluate how we want to run our business and what we want it to look like going forward.
I love that. So you went from out of state to in state, and now you're back to out of state, right?
Correct. Yeah, considering it. And we're still in the process of going back and forth on that.
Awesome. And I know we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but can you just give us a quick overview? I believe you probably just already did, but let's just walk us through what a value add strategy looks like in California or rent control states.
Yeah, so value add in California can look honestly in many, many different ways. The way that I do it is very specific to older multifamily buildings. So you're looking at a Class C property, or maybe even D. They're built in the 1920s, 1930s, like really old buildings that need a lot of work. Everything from roof, foundation, electrical, plumbing. You're building a new building, just keeping the structure. So there's a lot of work involved, and from that point of view, value add looks like a lot more work than if you were to do light value add. So light value add is, you replace the carpets, do, a couple of change up the appliances, make it look good. But the value add in California, that doesn't make you money. What really does make you money is a full gut job. So you got to go in there, gut your whole unit, and then put in new kitchen, the open floor plans, change up the layout as much as you can, add value, put washer dryers in there, storage units, parking, and all of that good stuff before you get to the rents that you expect to hit. So you're optimizing every little piece of the puzzle, including your expenses. So you're billing back your tenants, sewer, water, trash, and optimizing your NOI as much as possible before you hit the number that you're looking for.
So you're basically, it's a total reposition.
It is, which is why it's a lot more work. But the expectation is that when you sell, you're not going to get much cash flow even when you're done, because you're putting out a lot of capex to do all of these renovations. And yes, you do bump the rents up, but if you're playing the cash flow game, it's not as lucrative even after you do all this work. Because you're financing all of that capex. But if you turn around and sell it, you're getting a multiple of what you put in, because the new buyer is paying for the future value of that cash flow. So it is a good market for apartments, but to grow your money exponentially by doing apartment flips, so to speak. But after a certain point, when you want to hold, if you want a good return on your equity, it still makes sense to go out of state.
Sounds like the business. Sounds like the business strategy is basically flipping a multifamily and passing that on to a new product to an investor that's not looking ideally for cash flow essentially in the beginning, but looking just hold it long term.
Correct. Yeah. And there's many folks in California who are coming in with money but not wanting to do the work. And those tend to be the type of investors that buy the end result of our properties. I do keep one or two still in California because I want to see how it's going to play out in 20 years from now. So I'll be honest, I do keep a couple of good cash flowing properties in California. But if it cash flows under $100,000, then I tend to sell it and take my equity out.
You sound like what Grant Cardone says. I wish I still had the San Diego property that he said he purchased first. So that sounds like a nice case study that you're experienced with in real time. I love that. Shri, what should a passive investor know before they decide to invest in multifamily as an active investor? Because we look for more passive here, but you're explaining a lot of the active side of it. What should we expect going forward if we want to cross over into that active side?
Yeah, I do think the most important things there's two things. One is understanding the risk reward relationship. So in real estate, if you're looking at a large reward, you are also looking at large risks. So that relationship is directly proportional. So more risk, more reward. So when you see more reward, you want to ask yourself, what is the risk involved? And do whatever you can to mitigate that risk, but acknowledge that risk does exist. And whether that be, your flips going wrong or, your budget going out of whack, whatever that might look like, or in our case, rent control, possibly, changing our numbers quite a bit. All of those things are risks that you are taking to get that big bump up in return. There are ways to mitigate it, like I said, but that's going to be up to you to figure out how that's going to be done. The second thing is to really, really learn how to underwrite a deal, whether you're active or passive. It's hard, I know, but I always recommend learning the basics of underwriting, the basics of how people get to calculating IRR or equity multiples and things like very, very simple kind of basic underwriting is a very important key piece to making sure you're making the right decision for you. And if you are looking to transition to active, that becomes even more important. But even if you're staying passive, it's important to know that to be able to vet one sponsor from the other and one deal from the other. From my experience, the deal is what is more important than even the market that you're operating in, because if the deals make money in all markets, right? Somebody in Timbuktu is making money off of real estate. Somebody in a small town in West Virginia or wherever is also making money. So it really, for me, this definitely comes down to the deal. There's other things that are also important, but getting the deal right is key. And when you're passive investing, getting the sponsor and vetting them is also very key to getting your investing off the ground.
I love it. Understanding the business plan associated with the deal is where you were going, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest things after I'm receiving opportunities. I'm looking at how realistic is the business plan, because I get deals from new investors as well as experienced operators. And I can tell and I can spot, because of the underwriting practices I've learned, which you mentioned, I could spot how realistic the deal is as opposed to how far stretched it is and you're squeezing numbers or anything like that. So that's very, very important, understanding underwriting. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Shri, what's next for your business?
So my business is, like I mentioned, I liquidated half of my portfolio in California last year, and I'm looking to move out of state. I'm doing what is called as a hotel to multifamily conversion, finding distressed hotels, converting them to studio unit multifamily. And in the process of that, I am, bringing in some investors on these deals. I am also coaching a few newer multifamily active investors on how to get started on their first few deals. So that's essentially my business model. I am partnering with folks who want to do similar deals and getting my business from where it's today to the next level.
Shri, what's one piece of advice for the PI listeners?
One piece of advice, jump in. Do all the work, but definitely recognize that at some point you got to make the leap.
I essentially love that, because even if you practice just passive investing or jump into the active side of it, you get the best of both worlds. And now you really understand where you fit in. I had a question the other day that was, they were essentially a broker, and they asked saying, hey, usually I get the criteria for the investor, and then I go and I find the right opportunity for them.
Right.
How do I do that in my own investments? So I said, reverse engineer what your common goal looks like, and then go ahead and build your criteria, what that looks like. So start with the end in mind, and then go back and then draw that plan. What's that game plan look like? Does it mean investing in multifamily? Does it mean investing in flips? Does it mean in notes? Or does it even mean like stock market? What does it look like for you? What's hands-off investing look like for you? I thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. Just start. Shri, how can we get in contact with you?
My website is thesrilatagroup.com. So it's TheSrilatagroup.com. I know it's a handful. It's thesrilatagroup.com. I'm also on Instagram as Bay Area _multifamily. You can feel free to DM me there or reach me there. And I'm happy to answer any questions people may have.
This is my favorite question, and I got to ask anyways. And it's already there, but it might have a little bit more meaning. Is there any meaning behind your company name?
Oh, it's just my name. That makes it straightforward.
Awesome,
But
awesome.
I do have an investing arm called Selden Investing, which comes from Isaac Asimov's sci-fi books about an alternate universe. But anyway,
What was it called again?
Selden Investing, Seldon. And it comes from an Isaac Asimov sci-fi book that my husband's obsessed with. So
awesome. I love it.
All of my LLCs have a character from the book.
And now, is that for your personal portfolio?
Yeah. That's.
I love it. I know
Sometimes brokers call me and they're like, wait a second, there's some kind of pattern going on with all your LLCs. Do you own all of these?
They're all the characters from some book. I love it.
Yeah.
Shri, thank you for coming on. It's a pleasure hearing exactly what active investing sounds like, the process, if you're gonna go ahead and do it on your own. I love the value you brought to the table with that, and just breaking down the time cost and the value of return on that. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Happy to be here.
PI listeners, thank you for listening. As always, we hope this was the best resource for your investment strategy, but also the best use of your time. As much as it pains us to leave you, but you know what time it is. Time to go put this into practice. Till the next time we meet. Happy investing. PI listeners, I'm grateful for your time and I appreciate you for listening. It would mean the world to me if you went to iTunes and left a rating and written review. Let me know how you feel about the show. It really makes a big difference with getting the podcast out there. Don't forget about our Facebook group, where all of our guests are members of. I'll be there to answer any of your questions, or even questions you might have for future guests. Subscribe so you can get the latest episodes and our fan favorite quick hitters. Finally, I want to keep you updated, so head over to johnfortes.com and sign up for the newsletter. If you're interested in partnering with me, sign up on the contact page so you can talk to me directly. I look forward to connecting with you. Happy investing.